Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Patience. So today we are going to be making this beautiful shirt dress with a ruffle hem. So before we get started, kindly click the subscribe button. If you have done that, let's get into it. So I'll be using this Ankara fabric for this tutorial, and I'll be using about 3.5 yards. And I'll also be using this tulle. It is a soft tulle, and this is 10 yards. And I'll also be drafting on this pattern paper. So I've gone ahead to mark my shoulder line. So I'll start my measurements from this line. So to draft the front piece, the first thing I'm going to do is to mark my button allowance. So I'll mark 1.5 inch for my button allowance. So after doing that, I'm going to fold it this way. So this is 1.5 inch, and I'll mark half of this 1.5 inch, that is 3/4 inch. So I have 3/4 inch on both sides. So I'll be starting my circumference measurements from this line, that is the midpoint. So my shoulder measurement is 16 inches. So I'll be marking half of my shoulder measurement, which is 8 inches. So I'll mark 8 inches and I'll add half inch for sewing allowance, that is 8.5 inches. So from the 8.5 inches, I'll come down by 1 inch and slant my shoulder. So after doing that, I'll mark half of my armhole measurement, which is 8 inches. And then I'll mark my shoulder to waist measurement, which is 17 inches. And then I'll add half inch that I'll use to join to the lower part of the dress. So this is my shoulder line, my chest line, and my waist line. So I'll bring down this 8.5 inches to the chest line, and I'll start my measurements from this line. That's the midpoint of the button allowance. And then I'll connect the points and I'll mark the midpoint of this line, which is 4 inches. And from the 4 inches, I'll come in by 3/4 inch. That is for the front armhole. And then I'll create my armhole. So remember, this is a shirt dress that I am making, and it is a free dress. So I'm going to add about 1 inch for ease, and I'll add 2 inch for side seam allowance. The dress is going to have a belt so it can give it the desired shape. So on the chest line, I'll take my bust circumference divided by 4, that is 10.5 inches, plus 2 inch for side seam allowance and 1 inch for ease, that is 13.5 inches. And on the waist line, my waist circumference is 36 inches divided by 4 is 9 inches. So I'll add 2 inch for sewing allowance and 1 inch for ease, that is 12.5 inches. So for the neck width, I'll use 2.5 inches, and for the depth, I'll use 2.5 inches. That is for the front neck. Then I'll add half inch on the shoulder line for sewing allowance. So for the armhole, on the back piece, I'll use half inch. I'll come in by half inch from those 4 inches. And then I'll create my armhole, and for the back neck depth, I'll use 1.5 inches. So I'll place another pattern this way for the back piece, and I'll make sure the folded edge of the back piece is on this midpoint line for the button allowance. So I'll align it this way. And pin it down. And I'll cut out the back piece first and cut out the front piece. So I'm going to trace out the lines, the 3/4 inch. And then I'll divide the front piece into two. Because I'll fold the 3/4 inch this way and fold it again for the button allowance. So on the fabric, I'm going to stitch on this open edge, and I'll also stitch on the closed edge on both sides. So this is the front piece and the back piece. So our patterns are ready. So the button hole is going to be on one piece and the button is going to be on the other piece. So I'll go and cut this on my fabric and come back and show you. So I've done that. As you can see, this is the back piece. And I'm placing good sides together. That's the back and the front piece. And what I did was I ironed a hairstay on it, that is on the button allowance, and folded it this way. So I'll be joining the shoulders together. So I'll align it and pin it down. So I'll sew on the 1/2 inch I left for sewing allowance, and I'll also pin the side together, and I'll sew on the 2 inch I left for side seam allowance. Now on the button allowance, I'll sew on the open edge, and on the top edge I'll top stitch on both sides. Then I'll come back and show you. So I've done that. I've joined the shoulders and I've also joined the side seam allowance, and I also top stitch on the button allowance, both on the open edge and the closed edge. So this is it. So in order to cut out the collar stand and the collar, I'm going to measure the neck. So what I have here is 18 inches. So I'll be cutting the collar and the collar stand. So I'll be using this pattern paper to cut out the collar stand and the collar. So I'll start with the collar stand. So the height of my collar stand is 1.5 inches. I've marked that already. So my pattern paper is folded into two, and my round neck is 18 inches. So since the pattern is folded into two, I'll divide 18 into two. That is 9 inches. So, and I'll add I'll add 1/4 inch for sewing allowance. That is 9.25 inches. So from the 9.25 inches, I'll also mark 1.5 inch here, and then I'll connect the points. So the next thing I'm going to do is from this edge, I'll go in by 3/4 inch, and I'll also come down by 3/4 inch, and I'll make a curve. So that is it for my collar stand. So to cut out the collar, I am going to also fold the pattern paper into two this way, and then I'll come up by 2 inches this way. So the round neck is 18 inches. I'm going to minus 2 from the 18 inches, that is 16 inches. Since the pattern paper is folded into 2, I'll divide 16 into 2, that is 8 inches. And then I'll add 1/4 inch for sewing allowance, that is 8 1/4 inches. So remember I marked 2 inches here, but from this 8 1/4 inches, I'll mark 3 inches. And then I'll connect the points. So from this 3 inches, I will mark 3/4 inch this way. And then I'll connect it to the 3 inches. And then from the 3/4 inch, I'll connect it to this point. I'll make a slant line to this point. So that is it for the collar. I'll cut it out. So on my fabric, I'm going to cut 2 of this, and for the collar stand, and also 2 for the collar. So this is how it is going to come out. So I've done that, and I also ironed a hair stay on it. If you like, you can iron a collar stay on it. So this is it. I'm going to place the collar together this way. Good sides together. And I'll pin it down, and I'll start sewing from this point down to this point. So this part is going to be opened. And after doing that, I'm going to bring it inside out, and I'll top stitch on this part, and I'll come back and show you. So I've done that, and I made sure I notched it inside before I bring it inside out, and I top stitched on it. I started from this point down to this point. So now I'm going to join the collar and the collar stand. So I'll notch the midpoint this way. That is on the collar and also on the collar stand. So I'll place it this way and align the notched part, and I'll turn it this way, and then I'll place the other collar stand. So I'll place it this way and align the notched area. As you can see, the collar is at the middle and the collar stands are good sides are together. So I'll pin it down, and I'll sew by 1/4 inch from this point down to this point. So I've done that, and the next thing I'm going to do is to notch it. So I'll notch it this way. At this point, you have to be careful not to cut through the stitches. So I'll iron it, and then I'll top stitch on this part. I've done that, as you can see, and I've ironed it. So this is how it came out. So after doing that, the next thing I'm going to do is to attach it to the dress. So I'm going to fold it this way and notch the midpoint. And I'm also going to notch the midpoint of the neck this way. So I folded 1/4 inch on the collar stand this way, and I ironed it, as you can see. So I'll be using the other 1/4 inch to join it to the neck. So I'm going to place it this way. and then I'll pin it down all through. So after doing that, I'll sew by the 1/4 inch. So after sewing the 1/4 inch, this is how it is going to come out, and I'll turn it over this way, and then the other 1/4 inch I folded in. So I'll make sure I push the rough edges inside this way, and then I'll top stitch. And I'll make sure the stitches are on this line. So when I'm top stitching, I'll make sure I am checking it. So I've done that, and this is how it came out. So after doing that, the next thing I'm going to do is to overlap the button allowance this way, because I'm going to stitch by 1/2 inch so that they can be together, because I'll be attaching the ruffles. So I've done that, as you can see. So I'm going to measure the waist area so that I can cut my ruffles. So what I have here is 40 inches. So I'm going to cut my ruffles. I'll be using the remaining fabric to do that. And so this is about 2 yards and 21 inches. That is 92 inches. So you can make it fuller if you want. And the length is, so what I have here is 28 inches. So I'll use 1.5 inch to hem the lower part, and then I'll use 1/2 inch to join it to the upper part of the dress. So to create my ruffles, I am going to start from 1/2 inch here, and I'll use the longest stitch on my sewing machine to sew on 1/2 inch all through, and then I'll gather it. I'll make sure it is up to 40 inches. So I'll join this edge together. And that is it. So for the tulle, I'll be making 2 layers of the ruffle. So for the first ruffle, the length here is 16 inches. So I'll use 1/2 inch to join to the upper part of the dress, and I'll use 1/2 inch on the lower part of, that's the second layer of the ruffle. So I'll use 15 inches. Now I'm going to use the longest stitch on my sewing machine, or I'll use my hand needle to gather it, and I'll sew on 1/2 inch all through, and then I'll also join the edge this way, and I'll make sure I gather it up to 40 inches. So I've done that. I ensure it is up to 40 inches, and I stitched on it to keep it in place. So I've done the same thing on the fabric, as you can see. And I have also hemmed the lower part with the 1.5 inch for hemming allowance. So the next thing I'm going to do is to join the fabric and the tulle together. So I'll place it in this way, and I'll align the waist, as you can see, and then I'm going to pin it down. And then I'll sew it round by 1/2 inch. So I've done that. I've joined the tulle and the fabric together, as you can see. So the next thing I'm going to do is to attach the second layer of the ruffle. So the length of the second layer of the ruffles I want to make is 11.5 inches. I'll be using the 1/2 inch to join it to the first layer. And I've gone ahead to join both ends together this way, as you can see. So I added extra 2 yards on the second layer. That is 12 yards, because I want to pleat it a bit. So I'll place it this way, good sides together, and I'll sew on 1/2 inch. So what I'm going to do is I'll leave about 3 or 4 inches and then I'll pleat it a bit. I'll leave about 3 or 4 inches and pleat it again. So that's how I'm going to do it all through, and it is going to come out this way. So I'll go and do that and come back and show you. So I have done that, and this is how it came out. As you can see, I just pleated it a bit with the extra 2 yards I added on the second layer. So that is it. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to attach the upper part of the dress. So I am going to place it this way. I'll turn the upper part to the wrong side and I'll place it this way, and I'll make sure it is aligned on the waist. Pin it down all through, and then I'll sew by 1/2 inch. So I have done that, and this is how it came out. As you can see, this is the back, and this is how it came out. Came out really nice. So the next thing I'm going to do is to attach the sleeve. So I've gone ahead to cut out the sleeve, and I have a video on how to draft a basic sleeve. I'll put the link on the description box. So the length that I'm using is 10 inches. I added extra 2 inch that I'll use to hem the sleeve. So that is it. And I added extra 1 inch that I added on the armhole. So I'm going to sew the side seam allowance, and I'll hem the sleeve and attach it. So for the belt, the length that I cut out is 5 inches. So I'll fold it into 2 this way, and I'll be using 1/2 inch to sew it all through, but I'll leave about 2 inch that I'll use to bring it inside out. So the length that I'm using is about 70 inches. So I have attached the sleeve, and this is how it came out. So if you like, you can make the hem of the sleeve bigger and add an elastic, just as it is on the picture. So for my buttonhole, I'm going to come in by 1 inch this way, and then from the 1 inch, I'll go in by 1/2 inch. And I'll leave a space of about 3 inches, and I'll also go in by 1/2 inch. And I'll also give a space of about 3 inches again, and I'll go in by 1/2 inch. So my buttonholes are going to be on this 1/2 inch and the button on the other sides. It depends on the size of your button anyway. So I've gone ahead to sew the belt, and this is how it came out, and I top stitch on the 2 inch I used to bring it inside out. So that is it. So I'm going to attach my button, and I also attach a button on the collar stand, as you can see on the mannequin. So we have come to the end of this tutorials, guys. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you find this helpful in any way, and don't forget to subscribe and also turn on the notification bell to be updated when I upload a new video. Thank you guys for watching. Bye.